Bunny. I do a small game, just a bit of warm-up. Who is originally from Berlin? That's more than I expected. Who traveled more than 2 hours and is a tourist here? Okay, so you all live in Berlin? The rest lives in Brandenburg? Who thinks is from the most exotic place? Where are you from? A great? Wow, Egypt, welcome. Anybody else? Well, last time we had people from South America and India. So they had to travel further than you. But today you win. Oh, and people online saying they are from, let me go into my chatbot here, Chile, Denver, and Colorado, and Cologne. Hello. Good morning, Colorado. Yeah, Denver is in Colorado. There's a fantastic university of arts and media. Maybe these are the people. Put that in the chat and say you are from that university. If not, tell us where you're from. Chile. It's pretty cool. Who's the first time in the Futurium? Oh. Well, for our first edition, Making Sense, I was the first time at the Futurium. But I mean, it's a young place, right? So, and it's all about the future. So. In the future, you come more often. Right? Oh, yes, Brazil also joined us. My goodness, that's pretty awesome. And I wait until someone tells me that I can tell you what we are doing here today, other than playing games with you. I'm really not good with jokes. Maybe some jokes about touch. Wow. Next time to bring one, I guess. Everybody brings a joke. Yes. Ooh, what is real? How do you define real? Okay, I think we're ready. Oh, ready when you are. Welcome everybody again. And welcome everybody on screen. We are live streaming. My name is Kathleen, or in German, Kathleen Schroeter. I have a background in science and high-tech communication, and I'm wearing a couple of hats, but one of them that makes sense for today is that I'm the chairwoman of the Virtual Reality Association Berlin-Brandenburg. So, just to name one thing. So I'm really passionate about technology and about science, and we are here at the Making Sense event, here live at the Futurium, the House of Futures. And everything revolves around the question, how do we want to live? We are in the Futurium lab downstairs, the place for events that encourages visitors to discuss the future or the futures. And Making Sense is that B2B platform that is an event series created and hosted by xpro and Retune. And Retune, let me tell you at least 2 sentences about xpro and Retune. Retune is a festival and network for the intersection of arts, design, and technology. And xpro is a new European B2B marketplace for experience technologies, products, and services, a format by the Messe Berlin, Trade Show Berlin. So they joined forces to highlight the interrelationship between artistic exploration and commercial application. Today is number 2 of the Making Sense series, where we want to talk about touch and why this is so important when we create experiences and when we communicate with one another. So I tell you how it works today. We have 4 speakers and a panel. Those speakers will introduce themselves and what they are doing and why they think touch is such an important part when we communicate and connect with one another. They all have 10 minutes, and I will be in between telling you who is who. And if they go over the time of 10 minutes, then I might stand next to them and try to push them off this stage. but I'm pretty sure they will stick to the time. And then we will go in a discussion with them, with your questions and with the questions from the audience who is online, and I also might have one or two prepared. So without further ado, I would like to introduce you to our first speaker, and she has the 10 minutes. Her name is Alexandra Verdeil, and she's the General Manager for Germany and Austria at the inclusive design agency Tactile Studio. Alex, if you already want to go to the computer, then I can talk while you're setting up. She has a background in marketing management and entrepreneurship from the ESCP Business School. The Tactile Studio is designing and producing inclusive and immersive experiences for cultural institutions. And here it goes all around multisensory exhibits, tactile objects, and orientation maps. And if you are ready, then the stage is yours. Welcome, Alex. Applause.
Thank you, Kathleen. Hi, everyone. It's very nice to meet you tonight. So as Kathleen said, I'm Alexandra from the Tactile Studio Agency. We are based in France, Germany, and Canada. And we are an inclusive design agency. So we design and produce exhibits, mostly in museums and cultural places, for people with and without disabilities. It's the short way to say it, but inclusion means that we design for everyone, and we try to meet the needs of every visitor in an exhibition. And for this, the topic of touch is, of course, very important. It's actually the first thing we thought about when we created the agency in 2009 in Paris. We started with producing tactile models, so with 3D printing machines with innovative technologies at that time, to make art accessible for people with visual disabilities. And now we open the scope and we create inclusive experiences for everyone in the museums. So today I'm going to describe shortly what we do in general, and I'm going to show you a few examples, concrete examples of projects we have done in the world. I will try to show you a good spectrum. So we do a wide range of different types of exhibits, such as orientation solutions to make the visitor understand the environment and find his way in an exhibition or an open space. We do multisensory trails, which means we combine tactile, smell elements, audio elements, and also visual design to make the cultural content accessible for everyone. And part of this is also architectural models to understand the architecture or the material used for construction and for design of buildings. And the last part is the digital content and the digital solutions. So more and more we develop digital solutions, such as digital apps that are accessible, audio tours to make the content also accessible through audio, and interactives where you can mix interactions with between your body and digital content. How we do this? We have quite a big team of model makers that have a lot of fun, but also put their passion in producing the objects. So as you can see, we use different techniques. So 3D printing is the first. We also use different relief production techniques to produce tactile models. And it's always really well made with high quality so that it's sustainable in exhibition places. So I wanted to show you some concrete images of the work because 3D printing is not something automatic. We don't have objects that come like this magically. And in our process, we always try as much as possible, and when we have the time and the space for it, we co-design with the end users. So in our project, we meet the people with and without disabilities. We create panels of people that have special needs to design the exhibits. So it's about producing prototypings that we test, or, for example, testing an audio tour or a digital app with people with disabilities to check if the visual and audio functions work also for people with special needs. So now I'm going to show you a few examples for you to understand better what I mean with inclusive design. So the first example, I wanted to be very concrete, and I guess some of you just visited the the exhibition, and I've come here before. So we just produced last week a tactile globe for the Futurium and also a researcher's diary. So it's actually transmitting some content of the museum in a tactile way. As you can see on the globe, you can touch textures and braille descriptions, and it's also visually designed, which means that any visitor will use this globe to understand the main topics. And basically here it's about the preserved areas in the world and the zones that are not preserved and that need protection. So it's about environment, and the researcher's diary is about what the researchers are looking for and how they study the environment. So we transmitted that through a tactile book with braille and with a nice visual design. Another example in Berlin, which is a bit more immersive and entertaining, we produced for the exhibition Schrecklich Schön in Humboldt Forum few stations for making the topic of ivory and elephants accessible for everyone. And I wanted to focus on this station there, right on the right, with these two elephants that you can touch, and there is a vibration to make the infrasonic communication between elephants understandable. So it's just to say that the elephants communicate between each other through the ground with vibrations, and we make the station with a vibration system under the board to make that understood. So it's actually very entertaining, immersive, and every visitor is having fun to use this. And as you can see, we also did the tactile models to make elephants from Africa, from Asia, to make the differences understandable for the visitors. Another example that is maybe a bit more conceptual, I wanted to make you understand how we developed the tactile stations for the Dubai Expo in 2020. We actually developed the all tactile trails for two pavilions, and this is the pavilion of sustainability, where you have this big building, like a big structure with sort of metallic trees around, and those metallic trees help the building to produce energy alone. So it's a self-sufficient building, and we produced a tactile station to make this understand, so you can discover the whole architecture of the building and then see how it works. So you understand that there are those solar cells on the top of the structures, and you can touch them, you can understand where they are positioned and how it gathers the energy from the sky. And of course, we also were careful about how we design it. So our job is really to check if the tactile elements can be understood, if the distances between the elements are big enough for a person with visual disabilities to get every element and to find the way in the place or to understand every topic. And here it's a bit interesting if we want to speak about cultural differences. Of course, the text is on the right, and it's written partially in Arabic, so we have also to adapt to every culture. So we had to find a compromise. Usually in Europe, we start from the left, and there we had to start the design from the right and go from the right to the left. And now to show you more interactive concepts and to tell you how we try to combine this tactile design with digital elements, I wanted to show you a few examples. So we more and more develop these hybrid concepts that are actually combining gestures. So the body is doing an action and digital interaction. So for example, you have a screen in front of you and you have to do an action to receive an audio, a video, or something interactive in the screen. And we develop them with the focus on accessibility in the background. So for example, this first example is a tactile screen that you can use with the braille on the side and some buttons, but you can also use it as a just normal design digitally. And you get some lights on the orientation plans, and you can recognize some buildings that are on the map. Here, for example, you take few objects on a plate, you put them on an interactive table, and you get some digital contents that come And you can, for example, learn about the history of a building or a symbolic objects in a city. So that was for the City Museum of Stuttgart. And we produced there more than 40 objects that are put on these interactive tables. So you can touch the object and receive digital content combined with this object. And we also developed some haptic solutions where you don't need to touch. So it's not that accessible, but it's also to show you that we can play with these haptic solutions and to transmit cultural content. And a last example I wanted to show you that is quite nice and interesting. We develop right now for a museum an interactive boat. So you enter properly in a boat that is reproduced almost in real size, and you have there many screens. So at the first sight, you think it's very digital. But actually, when you go to every exhibit, you discover an object to touch or to interact with. And then you can, for example, I put here one example, how to navigate a boat, for example. So you have a rope in front of you. You can pull the rope and navigate yourself the boat. And to make it accessible, we also put audio functions and videos that interact with you. So that's what we call hybrid concepts that are the most accessible possible, because you learn, you have fun with it, and you also have it in memory really for a long time, because I'm done, I'm almost done. So to conclude, exactly, I wanted to tell you that this is a way, the tactile design and combined with sensory design. Of course, I focused on the tactile part, but we can see we use also other senses to make content accessible, but also pleasant, so you have fun with them. They are relevant, which means you learn things, and above all, they are shareable. And I think that's what we try to find in anything, to share things with the others. And inclusive design is a way to sharing.
Share with one another.
Thank you.
Thank you, Alex. As I said, she will be on the panel, so we can ask her a lot of questions. And I already received some from the online audience. And while our next speaker, Philipp Ewerling, is setting up, I tell you one or two sentences about him. So Philipp is a chief creative technologist at Interactive Scape GmbH, a company here in Germany. Philipp has a degree in media and computer science from the very famous Bauhaus University, Weimar. And he focused on machine learning-based object and gesture recognition and innovative user interfaces on multi-touch displays. And that's what the company is also doing. Interactive Scape is a world leader in object recognition technologies on multi-touch surfaces. So welcome, the stage is yours, Philipp.
Thank you, Kathleen.
Yes.
Thank you for your kind introduction. Hello to everyone. My name is Philipp Ewerling. I'm creative technologist at Interactive Scape. Interactive Scape is a company specialized on horizontal multi-touch displays, as you can see in the images here. These multi-touch displays are in museums, conference rooms, and trade shows. And Interactive Scape is not only providing or building the multi-touch hardware, it is also providing different software solutions that work with that technology. Okay. So just the setting of these tables, so as I said, museums, etc. So we're having to do with public or semi-public spaces, and the users generally are novice users who have no prior knowledge of the applications they're seeing there. So the applications need to be intuitive and easily accessible. But to start with the question, we are talking about multi-touch displays. Does touch display actually mean that the user has an haptic experience? Well, the answer is quite simple. Imagine the left image shown on the left being displayed on a multi-touch screen. Whenever you touch it, what does it feel like? Well, quite simply like a sheet of glass. But it's not only about what you touch, it's even worse. Regardless of where you touch and what you touch, it's always the same experience. So with haptic feedback, you don't have any information about the content actually being displayed on the screen. So that brings us to the conclusion, touch interaction so far is a purely visual experience. However, it's not only about texture and materiality. It's even more importantly about interaction. Because as it is just by vision that we understand the user interface, it takes very much effort for a user to actually understand how the user interface is structured. And also, when it comes to interaction, pressing a button actually requires you to follow your finger until you touch the visual button on the screen. There's no haptic way of feeling the button. Also, having a look at that user interface, it's quite standard. We have a row of tabs, we have some buttons here, we have buttons in the middle. It's very hard for users to understand the hierarchy and the result whenever I'm touching something, and it's purely visual. So what can we do about that? One way of relieving these issues is a usage of tangible user interfaces. That is, we are combining real physical objects with digital content on screen. So let's have a look at one example. So we're having the sneaker shoes, and whenever we place them on the multi-touch screen, these physical objects are then combined with their digital counterparts that then take advantage of the digital possibilities we are having. That is, for example, a product configurator or shoe configurator. But at the same time, we can feel by touching the actual shoe, we have a feel or sense of materiality, of texture, of weight, of value. So we're actually combining a haptic experience with the digital advantages. And obviously, it's not limited to shoes. It can also products that have a sense of smell, like perfumes, can become interactive objects. Or, like this example, historical objects that, again, convey a sense of materiality and age as well. So, tangible objects help us addressing multiple senses. However, it's not only about the senses, it's furthermore about the interaction. Because tangibles help us expanding the interaction space from the flat surface into the space above the display. And that brings several benefits. First of all, as the interaction space is now above the surface, it is far better visible for other users, especially from afar. Looking at these two images, when we look at the tables, imagine we didn't have the objects placed on them. What would we see? We would see a glossy surface. We wouldn't see anything of the user interface. However, the tangible objects give us already a clue how users can interact with the digital content. And even more so, when we get closer to the display, the tangible objects basically reduce the complexity of the previously purely visual user interface into a more accessible blocks. So actually users approach these objects by either just playing around with them, basically randomly passing by, touching them, and by the visual effect of the application to the actions, they're actually drawn into the application. Or it is by watching and imitating other users' actions. And that's one or two, it's basically two of the main advantages. So how does it work? It basically works because tangible objects create a hierarchy of the interactivity of the application. that hierarchy is often reflected that that the physical object is basically controlling visual elements, user interface elements on the screen. Like here's the object. When I move it around, basically the buttons that are attached to that object and follow the object around. So also the other way around, usually moving something across a multi-touch screen is requires a lot of effort, also rotating. However, moving the object around or rotating the object is a very common task for humans. However, also when we have several objects at the same time, they actually help us to structure a user interface and create more fluid user interfaces, basically. Here we see several objects placed on screen, and their user interface elements attached to each of them. Now the user can freely move them around and partition the screen space according to his or her needs. So I can either take elements closer to myself, or I move them away if I don't need them, and the user interface. However, so far we talked about a single user interacting with the display. However, given the size of multi-touch screens, which can accommodate multiple users at the same time, we actually have to take into account multi-user interaction. That is, several people are interacting with digital content at the same time. And we have to introduce one important concept, which is the concept of private and public space on multi-touch screens. The public space being the area where every user equally has access to elements, and then there's a private space which is related to one user only. And basically the prime rule is that no action of one user should interfere or negatively affect the actions of another user. So actually tangibles create a sense of ownership for the user placing the object on screen, moving it around. And the object actually makes the link also visible to other users. So it is for other users easily understandable what content belongs to which person. Also, tangibles encourage interaction between users. So it's not only placing an object on screen and thereby accessing digital content, it's also sharing digital content with other people, and it's a very human gesture, holding the object and giving it to someone else. So we are introducing human gestures in digital interaction. However, so far we've looked at tangibles that all include a private space. However, we also have the use case where tangible objects all at the same time interact with the same content. So we have an example here. So have you ever imagine zooming into an image with pinch to zoom on a large scale display. So when you zoom in, it works for you. However, what if someone else was all at the same time looking at the image? His or her viewing area would be completely gone. And that's why we developed these interactive rings that work as magnifying glasses and basically allow several people to zoom into an image at the same time. So by rotating, you zoom in and you have detail and the overview at the same time. And as you can see, two users can do it at the same time. It's not restricted. And actually, given the physical size of the objects, you can't interfere with the interaction of the other user. And pardon?
It's a magnifying glass.
Yeah, there is a fisheye effect in order, because otherwise there would be a large gap between in there and here. So if that would be normal. And that's why it's stretched, so when you move the ring, you see what's coming in next.
Loud. Beep, 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 beep.
Okay, I leave it with that. So
I don't know why it's not doing the sound anymore. Come on. We can also talk about that at the panel.
Yeah, so basically we are convinced that tangibles are only a starting point and expanding the interaction with touch displays. And that when we are thinking about touch displays, we are not only thinking about touch, but touch plus other input modalities that help overcome the limitations of touch input. And just showing some examples. So we know most of them. So, and now I give over to you. Sorry.
Philipp. Okay. Thank you so much for your presentation. We will talk more. Me having a lot of experience working with scientists, and Philipp is, his background is scientific, I can totally understand why he doesn't want to stop talking about his favorite subject. But that's why he is part of the panel later on. And with no further ado, I would go to the next speaker, who I met several times, I think, in Potsdam, and where he's part at the Media Tech Hub. That is one of the 12 digital hubs of Germany, funded by the German government. But Benjamin Heese, right, is the CEO and founder of Feelbelt. And you won't guess, but we have a common history. We talk about the futures, but Ben, you and me, we both were bank clerks in our first life. That's weird, right? Super creep. But when you look at his LinkedIn, you see that he's talking about haptic feedback 2.0 and the new buzzword metaverse, gaming, and XR. I know him from the XR world. And since 2018, he's the CEO and founder of Feelbelt, and that's what he will present to us. And as I already used some time, the stage is yours.
Thank you.
Oh. Sorry, one more thing. Ben, please put the microphone really close so that the people online can hear you, because I think we have around, we have a couple of people and I'm getting the feedback that the microphone has to be here. And you have 10 minutes.
Okay, I will do. I'm faster, pretty sure. Yeah, I'm from Feelbelt, and we try to make the digital world feel real. And the digital world is at the moment only in the most time, only you can see and feel. And you have one important part that you are missing, and that's the feeling from the digital content. And it gives one scientist's word, it names the hormone oxytocin. I'm pretty sure not a lot of people hear about it, but in German you would say it's the Kuschelhormon. And it's so important for a lot of topics in our brain and our human, and that's the reason why you need touch and you need the feeling. And we develop a technology, and then that's enough what I talk about our company. We develop a technology that lets you feel the completely frequency of digital content. It means that you can feel up to 20,000 hertz, everything. And I go in the later pages a little bit about what it means. But that's nearly the same picture of what you have with the phone, and the most people can know haptic feedback from a phone. If it rings, you know that's haptic feedback, and you know what to do. But that's a standard haptic feedback solution. And the PlayStation 5 controller makes a big step with haptic feedback. It's a little bit with force feedback, but for the normal consumer, they give the technology to the casual gamer. And in the past, the first controller from the gaming has a little bit of feedback and it rings a little bit. But if you ever try this controller, it makes it completely different. But our vision is to make Ready Player One real. If you know or you ever seen this movie, it's a game that you has the opportunity to put out your real life and go in the digital world, and you find the love maybe in the digital world. And yeah. But at the moment, it gives a big problem. The digital world don't feel real. And if you compare it with the real world, and that's the reason what I want to talk with you guys, is how is it possible to make the digital world nearly the same like the real world? And if you imagine the T-Rex stands here in the room, it could be, I'm pretty sure you have a lot of fear. And if you think about what is in the background happens, you feel the steps from the T-Rex from the ground. You can feel how the T-Rex cry. But if you look to to the movie, what is the name of Jurassic Park? It's only entertainment. You see and you don't feel it. But put love music on this movie, it gives a completely different impact to you. But what's happened if you can feel the T-Rex in the Jurassic Park? Or with the car racing. If you sit in the Porsche, you know what it means emotion from haptic feedback or from vibration. And in the 90%, no, 95% of the racing happens in the digital way. And the problem of car racers is they can't feel their car in a digital way. It's the same track, it's the same way, but they have, I don't know what is the English word, in German you would say popometer. The car racer feels this track on the street. And in the digital way, you don't have any emotions with the car. And imagine you are directly in the fight with these guys. You have a lot of emotions in this moment. But if you look the movie, I think it's 300, the movie, it's only entertainment. You sit on the couch and play with the smartphone and it doesn't happen a lot with you. But what is the problem? You see the digital content and you hear the digital content, but you miss the feeling. And that's the reason why you sit in front of your laptop and look Netflix and play with your phone, because it's only not directly with you and you can't feel what's happened directly. And it's missing the wow effect completely. But the problem is the technology. The problem is that you can't feel digital, and that's a big problem. And that's what we think about and what is our game. How can we make the digital world feel real? And that's one part on the topic today, that you bring the haptic feedback to the gaming, to the metaverse, to the VR, that it makes more realistic. Think about you are in a VR topic and you go back to a wall. Nothing happened with you, but in the real world, you come and back on the front and you can feel it. And our technology is a little bit behind because you can feel a little bit more, but that's not important today. But the human hearing is up to 20,000 hertz. If you are a little bit older, it could be a little bit less. But in the normal way, you can feel. But what has happened if you feel? Did you know that the German language goes up to 3,000 hertz, or the English language up to 12,000? It's a difference between ich liebe dich and I love you. And we make able that you can feel the different ways, but also the slippy tires on the street, or a bird blutet, it's a Blaumeise. But in the normal way, with your phone at the moment, you only can feel in the range up to 400 hertz, and you can feel and can play with this. And we built an algorithm that we are making to put it down a little bit. It's a bit technical, but and that you make able that you can feel a woman voice. Like in a concert, it's really cool effect. And for us, it's important to bring these topics. The gaming and metaverse is a low-hanging fruit for us because that makes totally sense. But if you imagine you can't hear and we are able that you can feel the whole language, that is the way that we work together with the NHS, that deaf and hearing impaired person are able to learn faster a language. That's in the background on this topic. Or if you think about the way that you has the well-being topic, it helps you to put in this moment with the meditation, and the haptic feedback helps you to enjoy this topic. But I have a little video because we maybe you know the company Goes Feel It, and that's from the company Goes Feel It, and we go together and they build what the most people think about what is haptic feedback. It's okay.
Stop the video so that the audience online can also get a sense.
Did it work?
Let's see. Can you play from the beginning?
Yeah, I can do.
I think we don't hear anything.
The sound is not important.
It's one of these sound effects. And it's like
and right now we build the technology that we make able that you can develop your own haptic feedback solution, and you can imagine the most haptic expert in a car company are the haptic experts that decide how it feels the car, but they don't have any experience with haptic feedback. And that's why we give this software to B2B customers, that they are able to develop their own haptic feedback solution. Yeah, and I think that's important. The Feelbelt is one solution, but you need haptic feedback and so much other parts of our life. And that's the reason that we develop at this moment that you can put a movie in it and develop your own haptic solution, how it feels like an explosion or how it feels in a fight or so. And right now we put it in a share, and so you can imagine what's happened in the future with us, only that we not talk about too much about this topic. And our mission is, or we would say, it's not real until you feel it. And I think I got the time, right?
1 minute and 33 seconds.
That's good. That's for you, Philipp.
Oh. Thank you so much. And that gives me also time to go back to some of the comments from the audience online. My colleague from Messe Berlin, Patrick, told me that there are a lot of cool comments and people are already giving us some questions. And there are some compliments to your shirt. And I told Patrick, wait until they see Dan. So without any further ado, I would like to introduce our next speaker. We have a bit of delay, but I think in 5 seconds or so, they will also comment and say, that's awesome, we see some patterns here and cool colors. I should have come with my patterns, damn it, guys.
Why didn't you?
Yeah, next time?
Okay.
Okay, yeah, someone told me, I don't know, doesn't matter. I didn't want to outshine you guys.
I appreciate it.
So while Dan's computer will be set up here, I will give you a bit of background from Daniel Shor. He's the research and development, responsible for research and development at WOW.
WOW Tech and Love Honey, yeah.
Yeah, WOW Tech and Love Honey. And well, Ben already gave us a bit of introduction that oxytocin is a very important, hormone, thank you, a hormone, and the Kuschel hormone. So I think Dan will tell us more about that. When you look at his LinkedIn, I'm very curious what you mean with not only building products, but building people. Hashtag touch, design, haptics, and sex tech. So with a background, 1 decade in the industry experiences, Dan plans art, design, and engineering and human perception to create compelling products and experiences that utilize, and now this word is really interesting, cutaneous?
Yeah, skin-based.
See, I learned also something new. Skin-based and kinesthetic feedback. So I know you from your previous company.
Sense Glove?
Sense Glove.
Yep.
So now you know he has a lot of experience, Sense Glove, with haptics, and now the stage is yours, and also 10 minutes and microphone here.
Yeah, give me a 5-minute warning, and then I'll make sure I don't go over too, right?
Yeah, all right.
Yeah, so I have a bit of a problem, right? If I were to talk about my job, I would probably get kicked out of most B2B conferences. So I thought I'll go a little bit into like how touch works. Right. So I hold 3 roles right now. The founder of a small consultancy, Contextual Labs, Contact in Context. I'm also a research and development mechanical engineer at the Love Honey Group. So you'll know me for our brand Womanizer or WeVibe. I build dildos. And then our last one, I still co-direct a lab, the Vibe Research Lab, where we look at vibes to create vibes at the Delft University of Technology in the Netherlands. So overall, right, I advise teams on how to produce compelling and engaging interfaces using science, engineering, and design from a haptic perspective. So let's, right, why should you guys think about haptics? Why should you be thinking about touch? Why are you all here in this room? The primary reason, other than some of the guys up at the panel, is that you're doing it wrong, right? Just a little bit of a spoiler alert here. Haptics is very, very easy to do incorrectly. And it's definitely the future of interface design, particularly in the whatever-verse. But right now, it's really a focus on these big god glass displays rather than the really, really satisfying interaction of a million knobs. So, right, you have these expectations nowadays as consumers from a UI, UX perspective for these large, flat, formless displays. Now, I love my phone. I'm definitely addicted to it, but I don't consider it a particularly engaging or compelling experience, right? When I was a kid, I had like these giant panels of things I could turn and move and manipulate, and thanks, parents, for getting me into this field, even though you didn't realize it. But yeah, I find often nowadays haptic content is driven by marketing and not really an understanding of the body, right? This is the new Mercedes Ecus. It looks really, really nice on a website. You go, wow, I'd probably want to buy that car. But while driving it, do any of you guys think you could easily operate the climate control system or the radio, right? Nowadays, this desire to put everything behind a pane of glass isn't really a well thought out reason or a well thought out direction for haptic interaction. So this is the human body as seen by a touchscreen device. I love this picture. I'm probably gonna get it as a tattoo at some point here. But, right, if aliens crash landed on our planet and all they would find are our remaining bits of technology, this is probably what they think we'd look like, right? I don't know about you, but I don't really look like that. So let's talk a little bit about like how we actually understand the world before we get too far into touch, right? Vision, our primary way for fully abled of understanding the world. You have the fovea, that core 20 degrees, and the peripheral, which is good for capturing motion. Light hits our eyes, and we just understand it. It's very passive and indirect. Audition, much the same. It's in the cochlea, your ears, sound hits it, and then, right, you don't really think about it in that way. Smell, your body's, once again, pretty passive. You're just picking up those lovely stale farts floating around in the air, and that's what you wind up smelling. But taste is where things start to change, right? Your tongue is very active in manipulating the food and breaking it down. It's one of the few things your body does, other than in the sense of touch, spoiler alert, where you are actively participating in the interpretation of the world around you, right? Light isn't just hitting my eyes, or light isn't hitting my tongue and being understood, it's actually being manipulated and consumed. So our sense of touch is this very, very broad thing, right? If you took a human body and de-skinned it, you'd have about 9 pizza boxes worth of skin just sitting around. And lots of, yeah, pretty picture. Lots of different ways of actually understanding all of those things, right? So we have lots of subsenses within touch. The receptors are spread out everywhere. And our body is very active in the sense of touch. So what is the sense of touch? Because I sort of disagree with the assertion. Well, the easiest first way to look at it is that haptics is that interpretation of the information provided by our skin, our muscles, and our joints. But there's a lot more to it than that, right? There's pressure, there's temperature, there's position. I understand, you know, where my arm is sitting in the world as I try to talk into this microphone without getting too far off for the live stream. So it's the muscles, the joint, the skin, your fascia. Very important actually understanding how we interpret the world through touch. All of this combined is what we call the somatosensory system. So if we actually break down our single sense of touch into all the different submodalities, you have sort of cutaneous perception or tactition, so vibration, skin deformation, how I understand edges. But as I start to push on objects and apply more force, right, now my muscles have a role to play. It's a completely different nerve ending, or a completely different bundle of nerve endings feeding into the brain. Now, I don't differentiate between the two because my brain is doing that work for me. And that's true for itch, completely independent, once again. Nociception, so our sense of pain, our understanding of chemical stimuli, poison ivy being an example here. Temperature, hot and cold, once again, completely different bundles of nerves feeding into the brain. And even pleasure, right? So this is an area of emerging science, but our understanding of pleasure from like light, brush, and stroking touch could be a completely different set of afferents feeling directly into the brain. So we talked a little bit about this earlier, right? Here's how our input devices see us. here's how our brain sees us, right? This is called the homonucleus. So if we took all of the receptors in your body for touch and spread them out to be equal, you'd look something like that. You have a lot in your lips, you have a lot in your hands, and that kind of makes sense, right? You're doing a lot of intake around the mouth, and grasping manipulation, super important as well. The rest of the body doesn't really matter. Not entirely true, but right. If we take a look at what's called a JND, or a just noticeable difference, you'll see our spatial acuity on our hand, fantastic, down to about like 2 millimeters in some places, right? Your forearm, I can get a good, I don't know, solid chunk between 2 points of discrimination. So I can poke you at the same time with 2 very, very small stimuli with the same force. Yeah, I do this experiment all the time on students. It's about, a good finger length apart. And then, let's not even talk about the legs, where it's just a wild west of you can basically stab a person anywhere. They won't feel the difference. Now, our sense of pressure is a little bit different, right? It's not our hands that are the most sensitive, it's our lips. And this is driven sort of by the different needs, but this is also why making out feels so nice, right? We just have a ton of perception for the different degrees of pressure we're experiencing on our face. So let's take another minute and go back to the hand here, right? There are 4 main ways that we understand and interpret the world around us through our hands. These are called mechanoreceptors, and they're located all across the skin. So starting with the Meissner corpuscle, the Meissner disc, right, this is how we understand form and texture, located up near the surface of the epidermis, right? Very, very slow responding, small receptive field, wrapped sort of near the hair follicles and the fingerprint ridges. This is how I understand the edge of this TV screen as I rub it. You have your Ruffini endings. These are these long sort of coils. Imagine super, super frizzy hair, right? It's stretching and contracting, and that's how I understand how my skin is actually responding. So it has a role to play in holding this object, make sure that I'm not dropping this microphone in real time. You have your Meissner's corpuscles, light touch, so you'll find that a lot in the sort of around the hairless finger pad area. Very, very fast response, so it knows when you're touching something, when you're not, right? You need to know that moment you make contact. And then, of course, small receptive field, because I don't need it across the entire range. Now, the Pacinian, this is what I primarily work with. Obviously, sense of vibration. Lots of fun to be had here in response to Feelbelt, right? The human body can perceive touch up to about 1,500 hertz, 1,500. But the core response area to vibration tends to be between 60 and 400. This is why all of your cell phones will vibrate at around 180 hertz to 280 sometimes. Very, very fast responses, because right, this is not a slow, gentle movement, but vibration propagates nicely through a surface, and so we have these large receptive fields. So if you break this down, you get a 2x2 box of slowly adaptive, small receptive field, large receptive field, and then fast responsive, small receptive field, large receptive field. Your brain takes all that information and somehow turns it into a crazy picture of actually what you're doing. And so that's partially how you get these really interesting reflex behaviors. Your ability to not drop an object is fantastic. I know that most of you feel fairly clumsy, but the human body's ability to respond to stick and slip interactions in the hand is so fast, it has to be processed in the spine and not the brain. It couldn't possibly go all the way up to your brain and all the way back down. It's just, it's what makes robots so hard to create. But what I'm really passionate about here is getting people to think not about touchscreens, but to think around the body. And Braille is just one of the best examples of this in the world. I'm sure we'll talk about it on the panel together a little bit, right? But it takes into account those just noticeable differences. It takes into account how our body actually understands the world through touch. So from a visual perspective on this top row, right, I can clearly see these spacings in line, but, right, if you're non-visually based and your primary way of understanding the world is through touch, and it is for everyone up until about the age of 4, right, you can see I can't understand the differences on the lower end. So just mapping touch onto Roman characters leads to a bunch of really, really ugly blobs. However, if you know the 2-point discrimination threshold of the hand, you can design around the 2-point discrimination threshold and get a clear sense of what these different interactions look like. So Braille is just an absolutely stellar way of sort of trying to understand how our body might respond better to a touch-based surface. So, once again, right, haptic displays, and you can think of any sort of haptic interaction as coming from a display, much in the same way that me looking at this screen or that screen, right, my eyes are understanding something from a display. Video game controllers, the Feelbelt, multi-touch display, even a Braille, layout. All of these are haptic displays, and in order to do that effectively, you really have to think about the body's limitations. So I think we're on the last stretch here, and I'm probably doing all right on time. So how would I suggest you, if you wanted to get into haptics, how would you break that down? So first thing is you have to define the experience, right? This is a big part for me. Touch exists in a context. You can't remove some aspect of that experience and still expect it to work. So you really have to understand that start and that finish. Where is your user sitting? What is that, surrounding around their world? Break that down into a series of, distinct interactions. So when I'm actually picking up a microphone and then bringing it to my mouth, those are distinct movements. The grasping, the holding, the movement. How do I make those experiences feel compelling if you're going to do it in a VR, AR context? Right? Understand the critical sensations there. If I'm holding something in my hand, I need that feeling of weight, but I also need something to push back against me to really give that idea of hand presence. Once you understand that, only at that point should you really start thinking about signals, right? So if I need a force to push against me, how hard is that force going to be? Well, first I actually need to do the rest of that work. And finally, you can start to select your effectors. You can find a sense glove, a Feelbelt, a low felt vibro tactile actuator, plenty of great actuators and technologies out there. But you really have to start all the way back from the beginning, right? If I were to design a sex toy and not think about the experience, it wouldn't be a very effective product. I think that's all the amount of times I get to say that word. So let's go into it here, right? I've got just a couple quick little things to think about. Touch, first and foremost, is fallible. It's really easily fooled. The reason for that is, right, it's not a singular sense. It's lots of different things being actively processed in the brain. So I can create the illusion of hot, the illusion of cold. I can give you 10 grams of something at room temperature, I can give you 100 grams of something at room temperature, or 10 grams of something at freezing, and your body thinks they weigh the same because you have that conflation or that confound. It's contextual, right? The exact same stimuli can give two different reactions. So if I just walk up to strangers and touch them, they have a very different reaction to when I walk up and touch my friends. It's relative, right? This is a tricky thing that gets a lot of people lost when they start getting into haptics, but our body, from a sense of touch, is very good at understanding change. I can go whoop, whoop, right? But I can't necessarily tell you that's 120 hertz, that's 200 hertz. We're really bad at that absolute positioning. It's integrated, right? It's dozens of different perceptors rather than a singular sense. It's active. Our brain is taking part in understanding touch. I think we're gonna be good. I just have 3 more, I promise. Right?
3 more slides.
Yeah, no. 3 more of these. It's okay.
Okay, tell
right?
me.
And then the talk I wish I could give a little bit more is about how touch is social, right? So
We will talk about that now.
we will, yeah.
Together.
Hugs are just an incredible thing to go into, right? And just, right, next time you get a hug, do what I do and like really spend some time trying to figure out what is it I'm feeling? It's a lot of sensation for something super simple and creating those oxytocin releases. But yeah, right, if you're starved of touch as a child, you're guaranteed to be a psychopath. I wish I was kidding, but it's one of the reasons when you're born, the first thing they do is give you that skin-to-skin bonding. Touch is part of what makes us human. So last 2, touch is memory dependent. It's got hysteresis. So we remember how things feel, and then we build expectations around it. And those feed into our reflexes. That's why when I grab rotten fruit, I let go before I realize, oh, that fruit was rotten, I should probably release this. And it's bidirectional. right? Anything that I'm exploring through my sense of touch is pushing back against me. It's the classic example of, right, like anything you observe is changed by the observation. So, right, I know that I'm holding this microphone, but it's pushing back at me at the same time. I think that's my last slide. So,
Oh, thank you so much.
thank you.
So, may I ask all the speakers to grab your chair and do what I did? There is this button that you can push underneath that gives you a bit of a lift so that also the last row can see us. Hey, now we are here in our bar. And oh, for you it's different. Oh yeah, now we go. So I have some questions, but the audience online has some. Before I go to the online ones, we also have a microphone here, right, Julian, for the audience that is in this room. Who would like to address the first question?
You can only ask him if you break down the interaction of holding the microphone, and I'll quiz you on it afterwards.
Yeah. Well, then I start with one that comes. How about we give the microphone, Julian? There, in the back, there's one question.
Yeah, but now I broke this.
You
I
broke
have to
something.
Fix it now.
Oh, hang on.
like
I
this,
give
and
the
now-
microphone.
No, I'm fixed now. I can do it.
I can do it. No, the audience wants to. Online audience needs to hear it. Otherwise, I have to.
1, 2, 1, 2.
I
Can
have
you
to
hear
do
me
it
online?
again. Hello.
So yeah, really interesting talk. Thanks so much. I came a bit late, so sorry that I can't say that for everyone. But but I wanted to ask one thing. Like recently, I watched my daughter taking a cork into her mouth, and I was like strangely thinking that I know how this feels. So I'm wondering, when is this like something that you built up during your childhood, like the kind of database of all touches and feelings?
Yeah, so I'm guessing the question's addressed to me, but I'll hand it to you guys afterwards. My understanding from the literature I've read is basically for the first 6 to 8 months of your life, everything is taste. It's either boob or not boob, right? You're just trying to understand, can I suckle on this or not? As your brain starts to continue to develop and you're actually able to start to remember things, so from that 6 to 8 month range all the way up till about the age of 4, the world is touch. And this is why you see young children, right? They're grabbing things, they're hitting it on stuff. You're just trying to build that memory, that library of like, okay, here's how object properties work. Here's physics 101, maybe even 100, right? Like the very, very basics. And then once language starts to set in, once object permanence is really well established after the age of 4, we start to switch to a vision-centric lifestyle. And that's when we kind of just forget the amazingness that is touch.
Yeah,
Anyone
what's
wanna
the
add
take from the
anything?
others? I have some microphone here. If you want to add, you don't.
Maybe I would add something, yeah. What you say is really true, and I think at some point we tell the kids not to touch anything anymore. It's kind of forbidden, and it prevents from developing the taste capacities, abilities. So it's something we should experiment more, and that's why we should touch almost everything. We should be able to train our touch abilities.
100% agree.
Me too, actually. Other questions? Otherwise, I have, in the meantime, one from online. Alex, thumbs up for your presentation. Matt is online. He's also he's a maker of textile exhibits. And he's basically asking what does the textures of you had the continents and the globe. So what's the texture of the globe in comparison to the texture of the ocean?
Okay, it's kind of technical.
Yeah, I
you
know,
should
but
come to see.
it's important.
So basically, I think we have one layer more for the continents.
Mm-hmm.
So you touch the sea as a flat texture and you recognize the continents on an additional layer. And then for all the surfaces that are defined as preserved surfaces or surfaces under danger, it's different textures. So lines, points, and we try to figure out which textures can be differentiated by the fingers to be able to differentiate both textures.
Mm-hmm. As Dan touched on Braille, I also have another question for you, Alex. I'm not quite sure if I get how Braille works. the language. Can you get a bit more into that? I'm not sure if the audience knows that and can explain that, but I think really interesting because I have a neighbor who is blind and like.
Sure. So Braille works with these cells of 6 points, and you play with many combinations of the 6 points to show one sign. So, for example, the letter A would be 1 point in one cell, and the letter B 2 points in a certain configuration, and so on and so on. And then you have also special signs for in Braille. And what is interesting, since we work in a multicultural environment, is that Braille is actually different in every country. So it's like sign language or our languages, it's different. So the cells work in the same way. You always have cells of 6 points, but every letter not every letter is different, but many signs are different in every language. So it's kind of very specific, and there are experts able to correct the Braille in a certain way and to write it well. So yeah.
So as it is quite connected to the skin sensitivity that you already said, like, do you think that people who are able to read Braille have like trained fingers that are more sensitive to other people?
So there is some training effect, and if you've ever watched someone fully blind read Braille, it's a two-handed experience, right? So it sort of looks like this like simultaneous processing, right? And so it's not necessarily that their sensitivities are higher. A lot of that's actually related to hand size. It's more that their brain is optimized to process that information. So when your visual cortex isn't being utilized at all, the neighboring areas expand to fill up that space. And so more of your brain becomes devoted to understanding the world through touch. And that's how you wind up with Daredevil, right? That's the character that's blind and can do everything. So a little bit of that.
Ah, okay. Thank you. I have another question from Maria. I think it's to everybody on that panel. Is touch as input something that will really define future textiles a lot? How could these technologies be re-implemented for places where there is not as common or usual access to the places? Maria from Chile. Does anybody have a take on that?
And sorry, the question was about textiles, like fabrics?
Yeah.
Oh.
I think really define future textiles. How does touch as an input define it?
I would say it could be. It depends on the content. And if you have a good content that you need the haptic feedback in this area, it's not a problem to implement the haptic feedback or the tactile effect on this part. But you need a customer experience that is needable or that is a good user case. And I would say it's possible, but I don't know what is the use case.
Maria, if you want to tell us what you see as use cases, just put it in the comments.
I mean, if we want to sort of noodle on this for a second across the four of us, right? I'm thinking about like wintertime Scandinavia, super chunky blanket, right? Like there's an experience there, and the texture of that textile is a very important part of it, and trying to create a connected experience. And I think that's sort of what the question's getting at, right? Like how do you bring those critical elements in? So, right, in multi-sensory display or on body-borne displays, like how would you guys go about bringing that sensation of warmth and comfort and chunky sweater?
Everybody's just snapping.
You want to take a crack at it? All right.
What did you think?
Yeah,
What do you think?
Right. So when I was at Sense Club, we always had we used the same "Make the digital feel real" tagline as you guys. So we should probably fight that out at some point. But for us, it was always about like what are the critical elements of the feedback? What is the really, really important stuff? And then trying to separate the idea of the signal from sort of the tactile noise. So we worked around an idea that I used to call like the minimum viable vibration, right? So do you really need the textile or do you need the warmth? What is the more important part of the experience is sort of where I'd start that question. And then, yeah, right, like a big part of that is also gonna be the weight, right? And that's what makes haptic displays so hard to do. Anything that you mount onto your user's gonna feel, it's gonna affect their range of motion, it's gonna create some sort of pushback. So just creating these like really, really simple experiences that the human body can easily understand is actually an incredibly difficult thing to do. So I encourage everyone to like get into haptics by just thinking, what are you experiencing? And then what are the important parts? And why do I think that's important?
Maybe to go a bit deeper into the user experience itself. And this is also maybe a question for all of you. How do you collaborate with the end user? Oh, you don't like that question. Okay, let's give it to Dan and then to Ben, and we can come back to you.
I think that's really, really important what the end users want to feel and what is the emotional effect and after the feeling, because it increases the emotion. And I would say sometimes it could be too intense. It's also, and haptic feedback could be too hard. If you think about in storm also, it's make bad emotions and bad feeling. And so it's important if you design interfaces that you get direct feedback from the customer and you find out what is a good feeling.
Mm-hmm. Philipp.
Well, with these multi-touch tables, we're a bit different because, like the products you have, you decide you want to have it, you want to try it out. But with these multi-touch tables, you usually, or something else you find in public spaces, it's mainly something you walk by. It's more like in intuition that I go there. And then it's very hard to get the direct feedback because people usually just keep on walking if they don't like it. So you actually need to do like in-field studies in order and watch people how they use things. And basically, as it's more random as people are walking by, it's hard to reproduce these results again. So it's more like intuition and what you think people are thinking, but it's very hard to like have an exact study about.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, right, it's super personal, right? Each user, I'm assuming in your tables, comes at it with a completely different set of primings and expectations. For me, right, I only work on toys for vulva owners. I am not a vulva owner. So participatory design practices are incredibly important in touch, not just within my industry, but right, understanding how people's memory has affected their preconceived notions, their expectations in touch. I think more than any other sense, right, touch is about working around the ideas of expectations and then meeting them or delivering them. You really have to work a lot often in priming. I think this is something you're gonna get at in a second when I hand you the mic, right? Like, priming is a user for what they're gonna expect and understanding what like the cultural contexts might be is just a radical challenge within the field.
Alex? Hmm.
In our field, it's very specific because we try to translate visual images or visual content to tactile content. So of course, we need to know the needs of the end users, and we need to find ways to make them understandable for most of them, which is a big challenge because, as we said before, the abilities we have to understand things by touching are very different. And what we notice when we speak about, for example, people that are blind or visually impaired, they don't have the same abilities. And we can notice it when we do prototyping. I show one tactile picture to someone and to a second person, and the understanding is totally different. Or it's very easy, or it's very complicated. It takes hours, or it takes 2 minutes. Someone can touch something and directly say, that was this person, and I can touch the face and I recognize everything, and the other person needs thousands of explanations to get to it. So it's actually something we need to take into consideration when we design and when we do things for everyone, not only for people with disabilities. We need really to think about usual needs, to any needs that can come up to someone, and that's why actually, to me, touching is not enough. We should just gather all senses together to make things more understandable and more immersive and just more enjoyable. So touch is one part of everything, and there are many more. Yes, I know.
All senses are, but yeah. The oxytocin, I think, is only released after 20 seconds of hack, right? So we all have, after COVID, we do that. Just because I found that, Alex, online, and you talk about it, so integrating everything. Was that a, how to say, the differentiator, how you got the award, the Zero Project Award in 2022, which is just recently, for the innovative practices and policies in the field of accessibility?
Very long title.
Not the longest that I've ever seen.
I think it's how we differentiate, because so we are in the museums field. When you think about a museum, you think about paintings on the walls or objects to see, and it's about seeing all the time. And what we make different is the access to anything. And if you see what we do, you can really realize that we can do it anywhere, in any place. So it's something that we can bring also outside of the cultural places, and the vision of it, the inclusive design and the vision of inclusive design actually goes further, and that was like one of the good examples. But the Zero Project presents really many, many innovative projects in the field of accessibility. So it's nice to check for you if you're interested.
Congratulations. I have a question. Yes, exactly. I have a question from Ricardo. What methods does, I think he means you, use to make the translation from visual to touch? I think from visual to touch.
The method.
Yeah, the method. At least one example would be appreciated, he says. Thank you.
Let's say I am going to take the example of a building that has a kind of a special shape. We are going to, for example, special materials. So if you want to speak about the architecture and the way it has been designed with materials, we are going to do it in different steps. So it's not about reproducing the object, it's about transmitting different messages with different objects. So we would do it step by step with one 3D object with the shape of the building, and then material samples to discover that in the building there is glass, wood, anything else that is interesting and that has been thought by the architects. And it's a bit the same for tactile images. You go step by step. You show the main contours, then you go for the details. So it's really a process, because your mind cannot get everything at once, and most of the time you need to explain it step by step, like in a book where you have to learn things step by step. So.
Yeah, well, I think one of the important things too in like trying to make that translation is to not ever go directly about it, right? Because when you take a vision-centered mindset and try to apply it on touch, everything tends to fall apart. You see it a lot actually in something you work on, right? Mapping. Our ability to understand things spatially, like this is in this distance relative to this, it's very easy and intuitive on a map visually. Trying to create a tactile map is a much, much harder thing to do. And so typically the recommendation I give to my students, to my clients, is metaphors, right? Everything needs to be a metaphor. It's not that you want to create like, okay, here's the pace at which you need to be running. It's, you know, here's an acceleration, here's a deceleration. We're gonna, you know, do a frequency sweep up or an amplitude sweep up to actually like create the directionality or some set of movement that could then be interpreted into the actual message, right? Trying to go directly across rarely works well. I mean, is that true for you guys as well, or?
No, for Philipp it's not.
Well, I mean, because your challenge is very interesting to me, because I'm like team I hate touchscreens, if that wasn't obvious. And so, right, like, your usage of secondary objects, I think, is what makes that experience come back into the fold. I mean, I was actually really like the idea of using a virtual loop, awesome idea, right, for that magnification. And I think bringing that tangibility back in on a large-scale multi-touch display, we're like that's the real magic, I think, of your approach. Like, how do you guys choose that?
Well, it's very much experimenting. Like the time until we came up with the ring is no obvious object that you would associate with a multi-touch display. Usually it's clients coming to us asking, okay, I have a product, I want to connect this with digital content. So that's quite easy. But it often, when clients come to us, it often stops there. Like it's a one-to-one connection product and something else. Everything else is something that is slowly developed by experience and intuition and just us trying new things. And that was at some point the ring. And then there was like, okay, what could we do with the ring? It was like first used for selecting something. But then, okay, actually, we had the example of like pinch to zoom, because in the early days of multi-touch screens, all the applications were just like images placed on a touch screen and you could zoom in, and so complete nonsense. So because it didn't really work and it wasn't multi-user. And then we thought, okay, it would actually be quite cool if we could use these objects to actually bring a new experience to multi-touch displays and a new mode of interaction. So not stick with what we already know, but go a step further, develop something new. And it's currently with the ring, and it's actually about like expanding the interaction space and the options you have when choosing your interaction method, expanding that space. So depending on what the users need or the clients need or the use case is, you always have the best set of like tools available. And especially when it comes to multi-user experiences, you have like several people standing around. It's also, currently it's everybody is standing at the screen, but like human interaction sometimes also is like, okay, I'm standing at the screen, I'm going back, doing something else, and then I'm bringing like my results or something else back to the screen. So there's also this back and forth and exchange of data, and that was basically the last slide I wanted to show with the smartphone, which
Sorry.
actually...
You're not sorry.
Tell us. Please tell us.
Which is actually breaking up like the issue of the public and private space in user interfaces when designing for multiple users, that actually we all have like our own device, our private space in our pockets. And what if we could link these two worlds together?
Yeah.
And actually, I can research something on my phone and then bring it to the group, place my phone on the screen, and we can discuss there. And then I can take the results back on my phone. So it's and basically it's just where we're going, like small steps. Sometimes it's rather a failure. Sometimes it works, and then we go further.
I definitely agree with you. It's right. It's like touch. You have to try it. You have to try it. You have to build it. You have to prototype it. You have to fail, and then you're going to get it wrong like 300 times, and then finally it'll be like, oh, that might work, right? I've never.
But do you get it
seen
300 times wrong because there are 300 people who are trying it and everybody feels different?
I mean, I get it wrong 300 times because maybe I'm not very good at what I do.
That's what he said.
Yeah, no, right. It's really just, you have to nail the metaphor, right? You're telling, haptics is storytelling. It really, really is, in a way that I don't think any other like interaction design requires. And so, right, you're alluding to everything. You're never actually being direct. You're talking around the point, and haptics is all about nuance. It's all about these little subtleties. You know, like a good vibration pattern isn't about the on, it's about the off. It's about the white space. And yeah, right, it can be super difficult because you have all these conflates. Like you're right, your brain's picking up on the wrong signal and it's contextualized improperly. And so what you thought would feel like, you know, a contact mechanic of hitting the surface now just feels like this weird jarring thing that actually isn't serving your AR space or something like that.
Good. I would like to close that here, but see if there are any other questions, or if you'd like to talk to our speakers individually, then you have 34 minutes before Futurium closes. So I hope you stay with us. I have one closing question for you. Oh, there's another one. Okay. Oh, there it is.
So, thank you. This is my first time here, and I find it very interesting. I must say I'm not very skilled within this field. It's all very new to me. But one thing this is continue going in my mind is like, why? I understand that there's a need in your case for the museums. I can see that. That's great. But on the other hand, like I forget who it was. There was a slide with Mercedes. Was that Mercedes concept car? Yeah. So personally speaking, I prefer a 1980 Mustang with my stereo, and it does the job, and it does it more accessible. It's done, and it fills my need. Sometimes when I see these things, I mean, this is the Futurium, so I'll give it credit where credit is due. I want to understand how the complexity behind this and its translation into actual practical use is actually fulfilling a need that, in the case for the car, I can easily do with just the click of a knob. So my question, I guess, basically is, what is the overall force in the market that says, hey, this is the direction that we should go in?
Thank you. That's a very important and interesting question.
No, 100% agree with you on the knobs thing. I think touchscreens are really, really fascinating. The desire to put everything on a touchscreen, right? From a UX perspective, just gives you great amount of flexibility. What I think is happening though is we've gone too far, right? Like this is a pendulum, and now we're all the way at the end, and we're coming back towards maybe reasonableness. I think one of the emerging areas that I find fascinating within haptics are these sort of like mixed tactile displays, or things like BMW's ShyTech is the language that they use. It's right, haptic displays can be integrated in such a way that they go away when you don't need them, and that's pretty cool. But also, you can do a lot now with haptic illusions. So you can create knobs that have no physical movement. The iPhone 7 and beyond, the 7 and 8 is sort of like one of the first really great consumer examples. That pane of glass never moved, but it felt like there was a button under there, right? So you were getting all of the sensations. You can do the same on a rotary knob. So that same knob, and actually a friend of mine was a part of this. So in the like Renault DS, Citroën family of cars, the radio knob is the exact same part. But on the low-end car, they put a vibration motor and play a signal in that makes it feel kind of cheap and not very like solid. And then on the mid-level cars, it's a nicer waveform. And on the top-tier cars, it's basically like hi-fi audio back there. It's just a piece of plastic on a spindle with a vibration motor attached to it. The haptic is what's creating that differentiation. So you can create a knob that has 5 distinct trigger points, 15 distinct trigger points, and 30 distinct ones, or is just twisting smoothly just by tuning the waveform. And so that's what I think is really the right direction. Now, I could be wrong. I think multi-touch is a really fascinating thing, because I always look at it like it's like a campfire at work, right? We're all coming around the central fire and then communicating and sharing stories. I think they can be really powerful tools for collaboration as well. So I'm going to actually hand the question off to you guys now. But I think haptics does have a place, and the why of haptics from a UX perspective, like traditional UX, maybe isn't fully answered yet. But the long-term future of it is also things like hugs, which we can talk about another day.
Maybe we can talk about that in the next 30 minutes when we are mingling here and put down the microphones. But if you have one sentence before I end the live stream, and then we can talk without the microphone. Sorry, guys.
Your question is why we need it, or why we need such a solution. If you ever drive a Tesla, you know what's missing if you have no haptic feedback in the surface. But what is the impact from this monitor is you can put so much more information in this small pockets. And if you drive an old car and they try to put all the buttons on a car, that's completely different. And if I go in this car, I don't know what button I need to start the car also. And that's the reason why the digital monitor is so growing so fast. And if you go to a Tesla and compare it with the Mercedes, you know what is the problem if haptic missing.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Philipp now, right? We talk about more in the next 25 minutes without our microphones and, discuss further, because I think that's just the beginning of a very interesting discussion and also leading us to our next Making Sense, which is already in 3 weeks on the 14th of July. Thank you so much, Julian. And then we talk about smell and taste. Before the fourth one is then actually about audio, so hearing. I will be here again to moderate that because I'm really, really interested in that subject too. I'm not quite sure, I think touch is still my favorite, but let's see about smell and taste. I might give you later a hack for more oxytocin. Julian and Robert already know my favorite movie quote that I'd like to bring here when it comes to smell, taste, and so forth. It's a great philosopher who said that. What is real? How do you define real? If you're talking about what you can taste, smell, see, and hear, then real or reality is just electrical signals interpreted by your brain. If you can tell me who said that, you get a drink. Oh, the cameraman gets a drink. It was Morpheus in Matrix. And with that, I say, thank you so much for being here, and let's chat more and see you on the 14th of July.
It's like the one chance in